In the final chapters of my life, I discovered a line in my own will that threatened to erase everything I thought I knew about the grandson I cherished. But one hidden detail changed it all. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening in the comments. The buff-colored manila folder sat open on Samuel Davies' vast mahogany desk, a stark contrast to the dark, polished wood. Its contents were splayed out before me, looking for all the world like the scattered pieces of a jigsaw puzzle I had absolutely no desire to ever complete. Samuel, my attorney and friend for the better part of 2 decades, shifted uncomfortably in his plush leather chair, clearing his throat for what I counted as the 4th time in as many minutes. "Walter, I am truly deeply sorry," he began, his voice laced with genuine regret. "I would never have let you see this draft if I had any inkling of what was written inside." He spoke to me with that specific, gentle tone people reserve for the gravely ill or the recently bereaved. My eyes remained fixed on the stark black type on the page. My vision began to swim, the edges of the room blurring into a soft, unfocused haze as I reread the sentence. A desperate, foolish part of my mind, hoping the letters might magically shift and rearrange themselves into something, anything, less agonizing. While I am grateful for the lifelong financial support provided by my grandfather, Walter Miller, I feel compelled to express my deep concern regarding the materialistic values that have unfortunately defined his life, and by extension, his relationships. The words didn't just sting. They seared themselves into my mind. Each one felt like a tiny, perfectly sharpened dagger twisting in an old wound I never knew I had. My Leo, had authored this. My favorite grandchild. The boy I had proudly put through NYU. The young man I'd helped with the down payment on his first home in the city. The artist whose struggling gallery I'd funded when everyone else, including his own mother, said it was a foolish dream destined to fail. "There has to be some kind of mistake," I managed to whisper, the voice that emerged sounding hollow and foreign, even to my own ears. Leo would never say something like this. Samuel took off his spectacles, beginning to polish the lenses with the corner of his silk pocket square, a nervous tic I'd come to recognize over our long friendship. "The document was sent directly from him, Walter. It's an official part of his signed statement for the family trust documentation. At 75 years old, I'd weathered my share of life's tempests. I'd buried my beloved wife far too early, raised 3 daughters on my own, and built a successful manufacturing business from little more than garage dust and sheer determination. But this felt different. This betrayal sliced deeper than any hardship I could have possibly imagined. My mind flooded with memories. Leo at 5, his small, trusting hand clasped in mine as we explored the Bronx Botanical Garden. At 12, sobbing on my shoulder in this very office after his parents announced their divorce. At 22, tossing his graduation cap high into the air as I cheered myself hoarse from the stands, my heart feeling like it would burst with pride. "Can I get you some water?" Samuel asked, his hand already moving toward the crystal carafe that always sat on his desk. I shook my head, my hands trembling as I clumsily gathered the offensive papers back into their folder. "I think I need to go home now." The drive back to my house in the quiet Connecticut suburb was a complete blur. Fiery autumn leaves of red and gold danced across my windshield, their breathtaking vibrancy a cruel contrast to the monolithic gray that had suddenly descended upon my world. I pulled into the driveway of the sprawling Victorian I'd bought after selling my company the home where Leo had spent innumerable weekends and nearly every summer vacation of his childhood. Inside, I walked through rooms that had always felt like home, but now seemed like a cold, impersonal museum. Each piece of furniture and art a testament to the expensive things that, in my grandson's eyes, apparently defined me. There was the antique mahogany writing desk, where I'd spent hours helping him perfect his college application essays. The large open kitchen, where we'd bake dozens of Christmas cookies every single December. Did none of that hold any meaning for him? I collapsed into my favorite armchair by the bay window, watching the afternoon sun stretch long, melancholic shadows across the manicured lawn. My phone buzzed on the side table. It was a text from Leo himself. "Just checking in, Grandpa. His dinner on Sunday still on. Love you." The casual, unthinking affection of his message somehow made the wound feel even deeper, more profound. How could he send me these loving words while simultaneously describing me in such a cold, dismissive way to my own lawyer? Next to the phone was a framed photograph of the two of us at his gallery's grand opening just last year. We were both laughing, our champagne flutes raised high in a celebratory toast. I remembered writing him a check for $50,000 that very night to help him secure a second, larger location downtown. Was that all I represented to him? A walking, talking checkbook with a heartbeat? I cataloged the years of financial support I'd given him, the tuition payments, the down payment on his house, the constant funding for his gallery. I had never once hesitated, not for a single moment, because I loved him. I simply wanted his life to be easier, more secure than mine had ever been. But maybe I had been a fool. Perhaps in my relentless efforts to show my love through financial security, I had inadvertently sent him the message that money was the only thing I truly cared about. My fingers hovered over the phone's screen. I could call him right now, confront him, demand he explain himself. But some instinct held me back. If I wanted the real truth, the complete truth, I first needed to understand what had led us to this painful crossroads. I picked up the phone and typed a reply that betrayed none of the heartbreak tearing me apart inside. "Looking forward to it, my boy. 6 p.m., as always." Then I set the phone down, turned my face to the window, and did something I hadn't done in decades. I wept. Deep, gut-wrenching sobs that felt like they were being torn from the very core of my soul. When the storm of tears finally passed, a strange, cold clarity began to emerge from the wreckage of my emotions. Before that Sunday dinner, I had to have answers, and I was determined to find them, even if it meant shattering what little was left of my heart. The following morning, I woke up with a renewed sense of purpose that sliced right through the lingering fog of my grief. If Leo genuinely saw me as materialistic, I was going to find out precisely why. This was no longer just about my wounded feelings. It was about unraveling a deep-seated misunderstanding that had evidently been festering for years without my knowledge. I had only a few days before our Sunday dinner, and I intended to use every minute. My first call was to my daughter, Clara, Leo's mother. We'd always maintained a close relationship, especially in the dozen years since her divorce from Mark. "Dad, what a nice surprise," she said, her voice bright against the faint hum of her architectural firm in the background. "Is everything all right? Just wanted to check in," I said, keeping my tone deliberately light and casual. "How is Leo doing these days? It feels like we haven't had a real chat in a while." There was a noticeable hesitation on her end. "He's managing," she said slowly. "The gallery is doing quite well, I think, but I get the sense there's some strain between him and Isabel. Isabel Sanders, Leo's wife of 3 years, a sharp, ambitious art consultant whom I'd never quite managed to warm to, despite my very best efforts. Financial troubles?" I probed, trying to sound like a concerned but casual grandfather. Clara let out a weary sigh. "He would never admit it to me directly. You know how proud he is. But I helped him with the gallery's quarterly taxes last month. There were some odd discrepancies, very large withdrawals that didn't seem connected to the business at all. My heart began to beat a little faster. Did he offer any explanation for them? He just said they were personal investments, she replied. Then he changed the subject so quickly it gave me whiplash. After I hung up with Clara, I sat at my computer, a mug of Earl Grey growing cold at my elbow. I'm no tech genius, but I knew my way around the online banking portal for the joint account I had set up for Leo's gallery, the one to which I still made a monthly contribution. The transaction history laid out a narrative that Leo clearly didn't want me to read. There were regular, sizable transfers to their joint household account, far exceeding what the gallery would need for its operating expenses. And then I saw something else, something that made my blood run cold. A series of payments to a company called Sanders Curatorial Group, Isabel's side business. One, she had casually mentioned, starting, but had assured me was entirely self-funded. I leaned back in my desk chair, the disparate pieces of the puzzle starting to click into a disturbing new shape. But I still needed more information. Around noon, I did something I had never done in my entire life. I drove to Leo's gallery completely unannounced. The space, called Urban Canvas, was quiet on a Thursday afternoon. A young man at the front desk, Kevin, recognized me instantly. "Mr. Miller, Leo didn't mention you were stopping by today." "Just in the neighborhood, Kevin. Is he in his office?" "He and his wife left for lunch about 20 minutes ago," he said. "They almost always go to that little Italian place, Marigold Cafe, just around the corner." I thanked him and made a swift exit. The cafe was only 2 blocks away, a charming spot with a large plate glass window facing the street. I found a park bench directly across from it, my heart pounding with the sheer absurdity of my actions. 75 years old, a pillar of the community, and here I was, spying on my own grandson. Through the window, I could see them perfectly. Leo and Isabel were tucked into a corner table, their heads bent close together in what was clearly an intense and strained conversation. Leo looked utterly stressed, running his hands through his dark hair, a nervous habit he's had since he was a boy. Isabel was speaking with animation, her hands chopping the air with sharp, emphatic gestures. At one point, I saw Leo cover his face with his hands. When he lowered them a moment later, I could plainly see the glisten of tears on his cheeks. Every fiber of my being screamed at me to rush in there, to demand to know what was wrong, to fix it, just as I had always fixed everything. But instead, I remained frozen on the bench, feeling like a trespasser in their very private struggle. When they finally left the cafe, I quickly ducked behind a large newspaper stand. They walked right past me. Isabel's arm looped through Leo's in a way that should have looked comforting, but to my newly critical eyes, it seemed possessive, controlling. That evening, I placed a call to my oldest and dearest friend, Frank. If there was one person in the world who would give me an unvarnished, honest assessment, it was him. "Of course, I can meet for coffee tomorrow," he said in his gravelly voice. "Everything okay, Walter?" "I'm not sure," I admitted, the weight of the last 2 days heavy in my voice. "I just need some perspective." The next morning, settled into the corner booth of our favorite old-school diner, I laid it all out for him. The shocking discovery in the will, Leo's devastating description of me, my daughter's concerns, and what I had witnessed outside the cafe. Frank listened intently, his weathered face a mask of deep thought. "You've always been incredibly generous with your money, Walter," he said at last, stirring his black coffee. "Maybe, just maybe, you've been a little too generous." "What are you trying to say?" "You've solved every single problem that boy has ever had with your checkbook," he stated bluntly. "College tuition, the house down payment, the seed money for his business. You never let him struggle, Not in the way you had to. Because I love him, I protested. I wanted to give him the security I never had. Frank reached across the worn Formica table and gave my hand a firm squeeze. I know that, my friend. But sometimes, when we try to shield the people we love from every hardship, we inadvertently send them the message that we don't believe they're capable of handling it on their own. His words hit me with the uncomfortable sting of potential truth. And this Isabel, Frank continued, his voice dropping slightly. Something about her has always seemed off to me. The way she talks about Leo's gallery, it's always we, as if she's the lead business partner, not just the supportive spouse. You think she's using him? Using me? Frank's prolonged silence was all the answer I needed. That afternoon I made one final difficult call to Mark, my former son-in-law and Leo's father. Despite the acrimony of his divorce from my daughter, Mark and I had managed to maintain a civil, if distant, relationship. "Walter," he said, clearly surprised to hear from me. "Is everything okay?" "I'm trying to understand something about Leo," I said, getting straight to the point. "Has he ever, to your knowledge, mentioned feeling pressured by my financial assistance?" Mark was quiet on the other end for a long moment. "He hasn't said anything directly to me," he finally answered, "but Isabel has. She's mentioned it several times." "Isabel talks to you about this?" "She makes these little comments," he explained, "about how Leo feels he can never live up to your legacy because you've given him so much. About how he feels trapped by your generosity." My chest tightened. Were those her words or his? "Hers," Mark admitted. But Leo was always standing right there, and he never once contradicted her. After hanging up, I sat in my sunroom watching the finches and sparrows at the bird feeder. Their simple, instinctual movements were a stark contrast to the tangled, painful complexity of human relationships. The pieces were now forming a coherent picture, but it was a picture I found deeply unsettling, and I knew it wasn't yet complete. Sunday dinner was now less than 48 hours away, and I was starting to suspect that the grandson I thought I knew better than anyone in the world had been living under a shadow of influences I had tragically failed to recognize. Sunday arrived with a crisp, biting autumn chill in the air. I spent the morning pacing restlessly through my house, mentally rehearsing, and then discarding a dozen different ways to begin the conversation that lay ahead. My formal dining room had been the setting for countless family dinners over the years, birthdays, holidays, anniversaries, but tonight's meal felt more consequential than all of them combined. I prepared Leo's absolute favorite meal, roast chicken with rosemary potatoes, followed by the apple pie recipe my own mother had passed down to me. The familiar, grounding rhythms of cooking helped to steady my trembling hands, even as my heart hammered against my ribs with a nervous anticipation. At precisely 6 o'clock, the doorbell chimed. I smoothed the front of my shirt, took a long, slow breath, and pulled open the heavy oak door. "Grandpa." Leo enveloped me in a hug, his familiar scent of sandalwood and turpentine filling my senses. He looked exhausted, the dark circles under his eyes poorly masked by a forced cheerfulness. Isabel stood just behind him, a polished smile on her face that didn't quite reach her calculating eyes. "Walter, it's so lovely to see you." I welcomed them inside, accepting the bottle of expensive red wine she handed me with a practiced, neighborly grace. As they got settled in the living room, I found myself observing them with a new, heightened scrutiny. I noticed the subtle way Leo seemed to lean away from Isabel on the sofa, the proprietary way her hand rested on his knee, the visible tension that tightened his shoulders whenever she spoke for him. How on earth had I been so blind to these signs before? "The gallery's autumn exhibition is shaping up beautifully," Leo was saying, trying to fill the silence. "We're featuring 3 incredible new artists. That's wonderful news, I replied, placing a tray of appetizers on the coffee table. The last exhibition was a remarkable success, Isabel chimed in, before clearing her throat. Although the profit margins were a bit slimmer than we had hoped. I noted silently. Not what Leo had hoped, but what we had hoped. Actually, Leo said, his voice brightening for the first time, we just sold the entire Hannigan sculpture series. That's a significant commission. Isabel patted his hand in a gesture that somehow seemed more diminishing than supportive. Which we'll definitely need for the mortgage adjustment that's due next month. Leo's brief smile faltered. Isabel, please, let's not talk about business tonight. It's hardly a state secret, she replied smoothly, especially not from Walter, considering how involved he is in our finances. The slight, challenging edge in her voice was unmistakable. I met her gaze across the room, refusing to take the bait. Dinner is ready, I announced, leading them into the dining room, where candlelight flickered against the deepening twilight outside. Throughout the first course, we clung to safe, light conversation, local community events, my daughter Clara's recent promotion, my friend Frank's successful hip replacement, but I could feel the unspoken tension coiling in the room, like the heavy electric air before a thunderstorm. Finally, as I served the main course, I knew it was time. Leo, I began, my voice gentle but firm. I need to ask you something important. He looked up, his fork paused midway to his mouth. Of course, Grandpa. Do you think I'm materialistic? The question dropped into the silent room like a stone. The color drained from Leo's face, and his fork clattered loudly against his plate. What? He whispered. I saw the statement you prepared for my will documentation, I said, keeping my voice perfectly level. The one where you described me as having materialistic values that have defined my life and my relationships. I saw Isabel's expression flicker for a fraction of a second, from surprise to something that looked unnervingly like satisfaction. Leo's eyes immediately filled with tears. Grandpa, I just want to understand, I continued, pressing on. After everything we have shared, all our history, is that truly how you see me? Leo looked utterly stricken, his gaze darting nervously between me and Isabel. I wasn't trying to say what Leo means. Isabel interrupted smoothly, taking control. Is that some of the context was lost. We were having a broader discussion about the impact of financial dynamics on family relationships. It was more of a theoretical exercise, really. Then why was it included in a formal legal document pertaining to my will? I asked, looking directly at her now. She shifted slightly in her chair. Legal documents of that nature often require statements on family values and perspectives. It wasn't meant to be taken so personally. It felt deeply personal, I replied, especially coming from the grandson I have always considered myself closest to. Leo's tears finally spilled over, tracing paths down his pale cheeks. Grandpa, I am so sorry. I truly didn't mean for it to sound that way. Then how did you mean it? He began twisting his linen napkin in his lap. It's just, sometimes it feels like you think money is the solution to everything. That if you just write a check, any problem will simply vanish. When have I ever given you that impression? I asked, genuinely bewildered. Every time I've ever struggled with something, his voice rose with a pained frustration. When college got hard, you paid for a private tutor. When my first apartment had a leak, you moved me into a better one. When the gallery was struggling to get off the ground, you invested more money. I felt as if he had slapped me. I was only trying to help you. I know, he said, his voice thick with misery. But sometimes I just needed to figure things out for myself, to prove to myself that I could do it without being rescued. Isabel nodded in supportive agreement. What Leo is trying to articulate, she added, is that your love often seems to come with financial strings attached. That is absolutely not true, I said firmly. Isn't it? She challenged. When the gallery expanded, you insisted on being a signing partner on the new business account. When he bought his house, you were the one who selected the neighborhood. Even for our wedding, you upgraded nearly every choice we made. I turned my gaze back to Leo, whose eyes were now fixed on his plate. Is that how you feel, Leo? That my help comes with strings? Sometimes, he whispered, not looking at me. Not always, but sometimes. A heavy weight settled in my chest. I never ever meant to control you. I only wanted to make your life easier. I know, Grandpa. Leo reached across the table and touched my hand. But when you constantly step in and fix everything with money, it can make me feel inadequate, like you don't really believe I can handle things on my own. The words mirrored what my friend Frank had said so closely that I felt a sharp, painful pang of recognition. Had I truly been so oblivious to how my gestures of love were being perceived? Just then, Isabel's phone buzzed. She glanced at it and then stood up abruptly. I am so sorry. I have to take this. It's a work emergency. As she stepped out of the dining room and into the hallway, I saw Leo's entire posture change. He visibly relaxed, his shoulders slumped, and he took a deep breath that seemed less constricted. And in that precise moment, as I watched my grandson transform in his wife's absence, I understood with chilling certainty that there was far more to this story than one hurtful comment in a legal document. Leo, I said softly, leaning forward. What is really going on? Please, just be honest with me. With Isabel out of the room, the tense atmosphere in the dining room seemed to dissipate. Leo's eyes darted nervously toward the hallway, where we could hear the muffled tones of Isabel's voice. His hands trembled as he reached for his water glass. Grandpa, he whispered, his voice cracking. I never, ever meant to hurt you. You have to believe me. I covered his hand with mine. His fingers were as cold as ice despite the warmth of the room. Then just help me understand what's been happening, my boy. He took a shaky breath. Isabel thinks, he started, then stopped, glancing toward the hallway again. Isabel says that you use your money to control me, that you've always seen me as more of an investment than a person. And do you believe that? His hesitation was all the answer I needed. Leo, I have only ever wanted to support you in your dreams, I said gently. If my actions have ever made you feel controlled or diminished, I swear to you, that was never my intention. Tears welled in his eyes again. I know, but Isabel always says, I'm more interested in what you think, I interrupted softly. Not what Isabel says you should think. He bit his lower lip. Things have just been so difficult lately. With the gallery? No, the gallery is doing great. He lowered his voice to a near whisper. It's our personal finances. Isabel made some investments that went bad. We're struggling, Grandpa, but she won't let me tell anyone. The final pieces of the puzzle clicked decisively into place. Is that where the money from the joint gallery account has been going? To the Sanders curatorial group? He looked up, startled. How did you... I still receive the monthly statements, Leo. I've seen all the transfers. He closed his eyes, a look of shame on his face. It was only supposed to be temporary, just a loan until her business took off. But then there were more bad investments, and more losses, and... He trailed off, his eyes darting toward the hallway again. A cold dread crept over me. Leo, are you afraid of Isabel? No, he answered far too quickly. No, of course not. She just gets frustrated when her plans don't work out. She works so hard. And the comment in the will about me being materialistic, I pressed, was that her idea or yours? He flushed a deep red. She helped me draft the statement. She said it would be a good idea to establish clear expectations regarding family values in relation to the inheritance. Did you read what she wrote before you sent it to my lawyer? I glanced over it, he admitted quietly. But things have been so chaotic lately, and Isabel assured me it was all just standard legal language. My heart sank. Oh, Leo. I'm so sorry, Grandpa, he whispered. I should have read it more carefully. Isabel's voice grew louder as she re-entered the room. Leo immediately straightened up, his open, vulnerable expression disappearing behind a carefully guarded mask. It was a transformation I recognized from my own distant past, the meticulously neutral face my first wife would put on during the difficult years before I finally found the courage to leave. Isabel slid smoothly back into her chair. So sorry about that. A client emergency. She offered me her most charming smile. Now, where were we? We were just discussing different perspectives, I said evenly. In fact, I was just about to show Leo something important. I excused myself and walked to my study, returning a moment later with the folder Samuel had shown me. I placed it on the dining table and opened it to reveal not just the single hurtful statement, but the entire 15-page document. I think you should read the whole thing, Leo, not just the excerpts Isabel may have shown you. Isabel's expression hardened. Walter, this is neither the time nor the place. On the contrary, I replied firmly. This is exactly the time and the place. Leo looked from her to me, then slowly pulled the thick document closer. As he read, his expression shifted from confusion to disbelief, and then to outright shock. I didn't write this, he said finally, his wide eyes looking up at me. I mean, some of the phrasing sounds a little like me, but most of it, these conditions, these restrictions, I never said any of this. Isabel shifted uncomfortably. It's just legal jargon, Leo. All wills have that kind of boilerplate language. No, I said quietly. They don't. Not unless someone is trying to control how an inheritance is used. Leo continued to read, his face growing paler with every page he turned. This says, I believe my grandfather should place strict restrictions on any inheritance given to family members with a proven history of financial irresponsibility. He looked directly at Isabel. What is that supposed to mean? It's just protective language, she insisted, to ensure the family legacy is properly preserved. And this part, Leo's voice was getting stronger now, about how my inheritance should be managed by a third-party financial advisor, specifically Sanders Financial Planning. He stared at her, the realization dawning. That's your sister's company. Isabel's jaw tightened. Bianca is highly qualified. The same Bianca who advised you on those investments that failed? Leo challenged. He turned to me, his eyes clear and focused. Grandpa, I never wrote these things. I would never, ever try to control your decisions about your own money. I reached across the table and turned to the document's final page. Did you sign this, Leo? He examined the signature at the bottom, running his finger over the ink. It looks like my signature, but I have no memory of signing this particular document. His brow furrowed in concentration. I did sign a stack of paperwork Isabel brought home a few months ago. She told me it was for the gallery's quarterly tax filings. Isabel stood up so abruptly her chair scraped loudly against the hardwood floor. This is ridiculous. Leo, we're going. But Leo didn't move. He continued to flip back through the pages, his agitation growing. There's a whole section in here about how Grandpa should reconsider his wasteful charitable giving and focus on family financial security instead. He looked up at me, horror etched on his face. Grandpa, I know how much your foundation means to you. I would never call it wasteful. Isabel gripped the back of her chair, her knuckles turning white. Leo, this is not the time. Then when is the time, Isabel? He shot back, a new strength in his voice that I hadn't heard all evening. When were you planning to tell me that you used my signature on a legal document I never actually read? When were you going to mention that you've been actively trying to manipulate my grandfather's will to benefit yourself and your family? The tension in the room was so thick you could cut it with a knife. Isabel's expression cycled from feigned charm to raw anger to cold calculation in the span of a few seconds. It was a look I recognized all too well. I'd seen it before on the faces of people who valued money far more than they valued relationships. "You're overreacting," she said, her voice deceptively calm. "This is all a simple misunderstanding." "Is it?" I interjected. "Because from where I'm sitting, it looks a great deal like you've been manipulating both of us, using Leo's trust in you to try to gain control over my estate planning." Isabel's face hardened into a cold mask. "I think we're done here, Leo. Get your coat." But Leo remained rooted to his chair. He looked at her as if he were seeing her clearly for the very first time. "No," he said quietly. "I'm not done." And in that moment, with his chin held high and his gaze unwavering, he looked so much like the younger version of myself that my heart swelled with a potent mixture of pride and worry. I understood then that the wound I'd discovered in Samuel's office was so much deeper than one hurtful comment. What I had stumbled upon wasn't just Leo's supposed opinion of me. It was the clear evidence of Isabel's calculated attempt to drive a wedge between us, to isolate him and position herself for maximum financial gain. And the most important revelation wasn't contained in any of the legal documents at all. It was right there in Leo's eyes, as he met my gaze across the table, a look that was silently pleading for help, even as he was finally finding the courage to stand his ground. Isabel's face contorted with a barely suppressed fury. "Leo," I said, "we are leaving. Now." "No." That single, simple word hung in the air between them, imbued with a newfound power. I watched my grandson's quiet transformation with a blend of immense pride and deep concern. This was not the compliant, downtrodden young man who had walked through my door a few hours ago. This was a man reclaiming his own voice. "What did you just say to me?" Isabel's tone dropped to a dangerous low hiss. "I'm staying with Grandpa tonight." Leo's voice was steady, even though I could see his hands were trembling. "We have a lot to talk about." Isabel's eyes darted from Leo to me, cold calculation churning behind them. "This is absurd. You're overreacting to some standard legal language." "Is it standard practice to forge signatures?" I asked quietly. "I didn't forge anything," she snapped back. "Leo signed it, under false pretenses," Leo countered. "You told me it was paperwork for the gallery." Isabel's mask of civility slipped completely away. "After everything I have done for you, for that pathetic, failing gallery of yours, this is how you repay me?" "My gallery is not failing," Leo said, his voice clear and confident. "It's the only part of our finances that is actually stable." I watched as the full realization of what he had just said dawned on his own face. "The gallery was never the problem, was it?" he continued, his voice growing stronger. "It's your investments, your debts. We've been covering them with my grandfather's money." The damning silence that followed was her only reply. "I think you should leave, Isabel," I said firmly. "Leo will call you tomorrow." For a tense moment, I thought she might refuse to go. Then, with a deliberate, cold slowness, she straightened her jacket and walked toward the front door. "This conversation is not over, Leo." "No," he agreed, his voice resolute. "It isn't." The moment the front door clicked shut behind her, Leo collapsed back into his chair, his hard-won composure shattering as tears streamed down his face. I moved to the chair beside him, wrapping a comforting arm around his shaking shoulders. "I am so sorry, Grandpa," he whispered between ragged sobs. "I had no idea what she was doing." "Shh," I soothed him. "You have absolutely nothing to be sorry for." "But I should have known," he choked out. "I should have questioned why she was suddenly so interested in your estate planning." I handed him a tissue from the box on the sideboard. "Manipulative people are exceptionally good at what they do, my boy. Believe me, I know." He looked up at me, surprised. "You do? Did I ever tell you about my first wife? The one before I met your grandmother?" He shook his head. "I was 22, working as a clerk at a law firm. She was beautiful, charming, attentive, and very, very interested in the modest inheritance my parents had left me." I gave a small, wry smile at the old, painful memory. By the time I figured out what was really happening, she had convinced me to invest every last penny in a series of her can't-miss business opportunities. All of them spectacular failures, of course. "What did you do?" Leo asked, his tears subsiding. "I left her," I said simply. "I started my life over with nothing but the clothes on my back and a solemn vow that I would never again let anyone control me or my life through money." I squeezed his hand, which, ironically, is why I've always been so determined to provide financial security for you, so that you would never find yourself trapped in the way that I was. Understanding dawned in his eyes. "I never knew. We don't always share our most difficult lessons, even with the people we love the most," I said with a sigh. "I honestly thought I was protecting you by making sure you never had to struggle financially, but instead, I may have inadvertently left you vulnerable in other, more dangerous ways." Leo leaned his head against my shoulder, a gesture so reminiscent of his childhood that my heart ached with a bittersweet nostalgia. "I don't think you're materialistic, Grandpa." "I never really did. But there was a kernel of truth in what you said earlier," I acknowledged. "I have tried to solve problems with money, probably far too often." We sat together in a comfortable silence for a long moment, the immense emotional weight of the evening settling around us. "What do I do now?" he finally asked, his voice small and uncertain. "That is entirely for you to decide," I said gently. "But whatever you choose to do, I am here to support you, not just financially, but in all the ways that truly matter." "I don't think I can go home tonight," he whispered. "Then you'll stay here. Your old room is always ready for you." He nodded, a look of profound gratitude on his face. "Can we just talk? I mean, really talk about everything?" "I would like that very much," I said, rising from my chair to begin clearing the barely touched dinner plates. "Let me make us some tea." In the kitchen, as I filled the kettle with water, I couldn't help but reflect on the strange irony of the situation. For so many years, I had held the firm belief that providing financial security was the greatest, most important gift I could ever give to my family. Now, I was beginning to realize that the most valuable inheritance I could pass on might be something else entirely. The courage to stand up for yourself, the wisdom to recognize manipulation, and the strength to start over when you have to. Later that night, sitting in the living room with steaming mugs of chamomile tea, Leo and I began the conversation we should have had years ago. We didn't talk about money or wills or investments. We talked about our hopes, our fears, our mistakes, and the lessons we had learned from them. "I was always so afraid of disappointing you," Leo admitted, his voice quiet. "You've accomplished so much, building your company from nothing. I felt like I could never measure up, and I was so determined that you would never have to struggle the way I did, that I never gave you the space to find your own strength," I replied. Perhaps we both need to forgive ourselves a little. We talked late into the night, carefully peeling back the layers of misunderstanding that had built up between us over the years. With every honest admission, every shared vulnerability, I felt the distance between us shrink, replaced by a bond of understanding deeper than any we had shared before. When Leo finally yawned, his exhaustion overtaking him, I walked him up to his childhood bedroom. The room still held relics of his adolescence, debate team trophies on the shelf, his art school acceptance letter framed on the wall, and the quilt I had painstakingly made for his 16th birthday still folded at the foot of the bed. "I've kept it exactly the same," I said, feeling a little embarrassed by my own sentimentality. Leo smiled, the first genuine, untroubled smile I had seen from him all evening. "It's perfect." He hesitated for a moment, then wrapped me in a tight hug. "Thank you, Grandpa. Not just for tonight, but for everything. We will figure all of this out together," I promised. One step at a time. After he had closed his door, I went back down to the dining room and gathered up the legal papers that were still spread across the table. Isabel's campaign of manipulation had come dangerously close to succeeding. A stark reminder that the greatest threats to a family often come disguised as love and concern. Tomorrow, there would be practical matters to attend to, consulting with Samuel about the forged documents, helping Leo untangle his financial life from Isabel's, and considering what legal steps might be necessary. But tonight had given me something infinitely more precious. It had given me back my relationship with my grandson, built on a new foundation of honesty and trust. And it had helped me recognize that my true legacy would never be something that could be measured in dollars and cents. 6 months can change absolutely everything. Spring had arrived in a glorious burst of life, coaxing vibrant blossoms from the long dormant branches and warming the earth after the winter's persistent chill. I was sitting on my porch swing, watching Leo arrange potted geraniums along the front steps. A comfortable Saturday ritual we had established in the months following that fateful dinner. "These are going to look beautiful once they start to fill in," he said, brushing the rich soil from his hands. "Just like last year's," I agreed, pouring him a tall glass of lemonade from the pitcher on the small table beside me. He came and sat on the swing next to me, our shoulders touching as we rocked in a gentle rhythmic motion. The easy silence between us was still new enough to feel precious, a hard-won peace after the months of turbulence that had followed Isabel's departure from our lives. The divorce proceedings had been mercifully quick, expedited by the mountain of evidence Samuel had compiled regarding Isabel's financial manipulations. The forged documents had been only the tip of the iceberg. A more thorough investigation had uncovered a disturbing pattern of deception that stretched all the way back to the earliest days of their marriage. "I got the final gallery numbers from the accountant yesterday," Leo said, breaking the comfortable silence. "We're up 38% from this time last year." "That's fantastic news," I replied, my voice swelling with genuine pride. "The new downtown location is really taking off." The gallery's expansion had been entirely Leo's own achievement. This time, it was funded not by a check from my desk, but by a small business loan he had researched and secured all by himself. I had offered to help, of course, but he had gently but firmly declined. "I need to do this on my own, Grandpa," he had explained. "Not because I don't appreciate your generosity, but because I need to prove to myself that I can." It had been surprisingly difficult for me to step back, to resist my lifelong impulse, to smooth the path, and solve problems that were not mine to solve. But I was learning, just as Leo was learning how to stand confidently on his own 2 feet. "Your mother called this morning," I said. "She's bringing her friend Anna to dinner tomorrow night." Leo smiled. "Dad seems really happy with her." "He does," I agreed. Clara's new relationship was another welcome and positive change in the landscape of our ever-evolving family. Leo took a long sip of his lemonade, his expression turning more serious. "I've been thinking about something." "Oh?" "Remember a while back, we talked about starting a mentorship program at the local community center for young artists who can't afford a formal art school education." I nodded. It had been a casual conversation a few months ago, one of many new ideas we had batted around during our weekend visits. "Well, I've worked out a detailed plan," he continued, a quiet excitement animating his voice. "It actually wouldn't take a huge amount of capital to get it started. Just the use of a space and some basic supplies. The artists from my gallery have already volunteered to teach workshops for free." I felt that old, familiar impulse surge within me, the urge to immediately offer to fund the entire project, to write a check and make it all happen instantly. But I caught myself, remembering the hard-learned lessons of the past 6 months. "That sounds like a wonderful idea," I said instead. "Tell me more about your plan." Leo proceeded to outline his vision with a growing passion, describing a program that would provide not just artistic instruction, but also practical business skills, helping young people from disadvantaged backgrounds build sustainable careers in the creative arts. His eyes shone with a clear sense of purpose, his hands sketching out imaginary floor plans in the air as he spoke. When he finished, he looked at me, his expression expectant. "So, what do you think?" "I think it's brilliant," I said, and I meant it. "You've thought of everything." He hesitated for a moment. "There is one thing I wanted to ask you about." "Financial support?" I guessed, careful to keep my tone completely neutral. He shook his head, surprising me. "No, I've already secured a small grant from the City Arts Council, and I'm planning to contribute some of the gallery's profits." He took a deep breath. "What I would really like is your involvement, your experience, your business knowledge. Would you consider being an advisor for the program? Not as my wealthy grandfather, but as Walter Miller, the man who built a company from the ground up." I felt tears prick the corners of my eyes. This request for my wisdom, my experience, my time, rather than for my money, meant more to me than any words of gratitude ever could. "I would be honored," I said, my voice thick with emotion. Leo squeezed my hand. "Thank you." We rocked back and forth in a comfortable silence, watching as a group of neighborhood children rode their bicycles up and down the street, their joyful laughter carrying on the gentle spring breeze. Later that afternoon, as Leo was preparing to leave, something occurred to me. "Wait right here for a moment," I said, disappearing into my study. I returned with a slim leather portfolio, its cover worn soft with age and frequent use. "What's this?" Leo asked as I handed it to him. "Open it," I urged him. Inside was the original, handwritten business plan from Miller Manufacturing, scrawled on pages that had yellowed over time, filled with crossed-out calculations and scribbled notes in the margins. The humble, tangible beginning of what would one day become a multi-million-dollar company. "I was 28 years old when I wrote this," I explained as Leo carefully turned the fragile pages. "A divorced single father with no college degree and almost no money to my name. Everyone I knew told me I was being a fool, that I was chasing an impossible dream." Leo looked up from the portfolio, his eyes wide with a new understanding. "I never knew it started like this. You always made your success sound so inevitable." I laughed softly. "Nothing worthwhile is ever inevitable, my boy. It's built one difficult, uncertain decision at a time, often with no guarantee of success at all." He nodded, a look of dawning comprehension on his face. "Like the mentorship program. Like so many things in life," I agreed. "I want you to have this, not as some dusty heirloom to be put away in a drawer, but as a reminder that the most valuable inheritance I can possibly give you isn't monetary. Your courage, Leo said softly, your resilience, and the knowledge that you have those exact same qualities deep inside you, I added. They have always been there, whether I was wise enough to see them or not. Leo held the old portfolio with a reverence, as if it contained something far more precious than faded ink and brittle paper. And in a way, it did. It contained a legacy of grit and determination that no legal document could ever hope to capture. I've been thinking about my will, I said casually. As we walked toward his car, he glanced at me sharply. Grandpa, you really don't need to. It's not what you think, I interrupted with a reassuring smile. Samuel and I have been discussing some significant changes, less of a focus on simple financial distributions, and more on creating a structure that honors what each member of the family truly needs and values. I paused. And what our values are? Leo nodded, clearly understanding the deeper meaning behind my words. That sounds perfect. As I stood in my driveway and watched him drive away, the old leather portfolio safely tucked on the seat beside him, I felt a profound and settled sense of peace. The agonizing revelation from 6 months ago, the discovery of that cruel, hurtful description in my own will, had unexpectedly led to something I could never have anticipated. A deeper, more honest, more authentic relationship with my grandson. The materialistic grandfather comment that had once wounded me to my very soul now seemed like a strange and painful gift in disguise. It had been the catalyst that forced both of us to confront uncomfortable truths about ourselves and each other, and to find our way back to a place of genuine understanding. Later that evening, as I sat in my garden and watched the sunset paint the sky in breathtaking shades of pink and gold, I reflected on the true nature of a legacy. It wasn't the houses, or the stock portfolios, or the treasured possessions that would ultimately define what I left behind in this world. It was these quiet moments of connection. It was the hard, necessary conversations we had finally found the courage to have. It was the trust we had rebuilt on a foundation stronger than steel. It was the knowledge that my grandson Leo would move forward in his life, not burdened by a sense of obligation or resentment, but empowered by understanding, resilience, and love. Some inheritances, I had finally learned, were far too valuable to ever be listed in a will. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.